We have a special treat tonight, this afternoon, because we're going to listen to Mark Grigorian, who has the most incredible career. I was just asking him about it. I met Mark years ago at our shared friends, mutual friends, Susan, Patty, and our friend Levon Chilingirian, great violinist in London. And why was Mark, who was a journalist who had worked in Armenia, why was Mark in London? Because he was an honest journalist working here in Yerevan, but he was investigative reporter and he was doing his work. And at one point, someone rolled a live grenade under his feet and he was literally blown up and hurt badly, after which he wisely decided to move to London, where for 10 years he worked for the BBC. Then when Serge Sargsyan became president of Armenia, one of the Karabakh mafia, he actually allowed Mark to come back, and eventually he packed his bags. His wife and son are still in London, and had a series of jobs. I don't want to suggest that because I'm going to name a couple of jobs, he couldn't hold a job. He was so valuable that people were giving him jobs. He was the head of Armenian Public Radio, for instance, right? He was the director of the Armenian Architecture Museum. And now he is a freelance journalist and I would say public intellectual of great importance. And if you look at the video, this wonderful video that Anna sent us, I think it's, what is it called? The video, it's called something like Redaksia or something.
Pivovar, yeah.
Pivovar. Yeah. I actually liked it very much. And one of the stars of that video is our own Mark Grigorian, who now is going to talk about, I should mention all the things he wrote, but it's, they always say, well, he's written so many things, you don't have to mention it, but on all kinds of political and important topics, on elections, on how journalists should work, and so forth and so on. But besides that, let's just start and have Mark take up the time. Go for it.
Thank you, Ron. I am sort of very honored with such a presentation. Ron stopped at the very important part because a couple of years ago I published a big book which is called Yerevan Biography of the City. It was published in Russian and Armenian, and I'm still looking for someone to sponsor money to translate it into English. That is why probably, the sphere of my latest interest is the history and the present of Yerevan. That is why this is the topic of my talk today. Now, Yerevan is one of the very, very few cities in the world which actually has a birth certificate. The birth certificate of Yerevan is a writing, a cuneiform writing on one of the walls of Erebuni fortress, which is situated in the southeastern part of the city. And it says, I don't remember it by heart, that's why I would read it. By the greatness of the god Chaldi, Argishti, son of Menua, built this mighty stronghold and proclaimed it Erebuni for the glory of Urartu, and to instill fear among the king's enemies. Argishti says, the land was a desert before the great works I accomplished upon it. Historians obviously looked over and over this writing, and they found that it was done on 782 before Christ. So it's a proper birth certificate. But there were earlier settlements in Yerevan, on the territory of Yerevan. One is situated on the bank of river Hrazdan, and it's now called Shengavit. Nobody knows how was it called 5,000 years ago when the settlement was existing. Just to imagine, from the birth of Erebuni to us, so it would be 2,800 years, a little bit more. It's the same period of time that from Erebuni to Şengavit. So we can probably say that Yerevan is twice as old as its birth certificate. Şengavit, the settlement of Şengavit, had two most important things which make a settlement a town. It's the market and it's the water. Just think, all big cities of the world, all important cities of the world, they are somewhere, either on the river banks or near the sea or near the ocean. The water is vitally important for a city. Now, I'll be very brief and very quick because, we don't have time enough. Then, the next Urartian settlement on the territory of modern Yerevan was the town of Teşebaini. It started to exist at about 7th century before Christ and existed until the year of 590. Teşebaini became the capital of Urartian kingdom by the time of its decline. The empire was shrinking. It was moving from south, from the banks of Lake of Van. It was moving to the north, so Teşebaini was the last capital. And it means that all the treasuries of the kingdom were eventually brought to Teşebaini, and some of them exist even until nowadays because they were left and then buried and then excavated and then found by archaeologists. Until nowadays, there are three things I would mention that we in Yerevan have now that are coming from the period of Urartu. One is the bread. There is a specific form of the bread which we usually call matnakash. And this specific form of the bread comes to us from, 3,000 years ago. The other one would be grapes. And in Teşebaini, there were found sorts of endemic grapes growing in the Ararat Valley, which exist until nowadays. So hopefully, I hope very much that you have tasted a little bit of Yerevan nightlife and a little bit of Armenian wine. So some of these wines, which are not from, traditional Cabernet Sauvignon or something, they were from endemic Armenian grapes, which exist until nowadays. And the third one would be the pipelines, water pipelines. Can you imagine? Urartians were creating pipelines of stones, and the length of these pipelines, it was miles and miles. On the central part of Yerevan, now and then, when building new houses and new skyscrapers or multi-story buildings, they are finding bits of pieces of these Urartian pipelines. Now, after Teşebaini was invaded and ceased to exist, there was about 1,000 years that there were no mentions of Yerevan. No mentions at all. It could mean two things. Either that there was no Yerevan for the 1,000 years, or that it was an insignificant place which was not worth mentioning. I would say that probably the second is true, because there are some archaeological sites on the territory of Yerevan showing Hellenistic period that in the Hellenistic period, Yerevan still existed and people still lived here. And also, in that 1,000 years, Armenia had 9 capital cities. 8 of them are within the radius of 50 kilometers from where we are sitting now. 8 of 9. The 9th, Tigranakert, is near the modern Diyarbakir in Turkey. So if they were so close, we cannot say, that there was nobody living here. So probably there were, but it was a small, insignificant settlement, which was not worth mentioning. And then we know also that there was a church built in the 5th century, which used to be exactly at the spot where Moscow Cinema is now. It's just, next doors from Hotel Yerevan. So it was a church of 5th century. It was destroyed in the Soviet times under Bolsheviks. And then there is also a church built in 591. There was a brief period when this territory was under Byzantine rule, and that was when this Avan Cathedral was built. Avan is the northern part of the city. Now, in the year of 607, there is the first written mention of Yerevan. There was a big congregation of leaders of the Armenian church in Dvin, and 2 clergymen from Yerevan were invited. That from Yerevan says everything. Going ahead, there was a long period of invasions. 658 Arab invasion. 11th century Seljuk invasion. Then came by 13th or 14th century invasion of Tamerlane's forces. What does that mean? That means that the town was developing in a natural way, and it was developing because it was on the merchants' roads. Yerevan actually stands on one of the branches of the Great Silk Road. So it would develop, and then the invasion would come, and, a lot of people would be killed. A lot of people would be taken as slaves to the countries or tribes which were invading it, and there would be a stop, a halt. Then the development would start again until the next halt. By the way, talking about Tamerlan, there is a tomb, a mausoleum, standing right across the street from Hotel Yerevan. And that mausoleum existed until 17th century, when, probably no one took care of it, so it just disappeared. Then, from 16th century to the beginning of 19th century, it was a long period of Persian-Ottoman wars. In the 200 years, Yerevan changed hands 14 times, which again, meant the development of the city was halted, and the city dwellers had to rise again from the ashes. And in the year of 1679, there was a huge earthquake, a devastating earthquake. All the town, there was barely a single standing building left in the city. So again, I'm talking about a long period of time when the city, any normal settlement would develop, but this development was halted for multiple times. Then in 1827, Yerevan was conquered by Russians. Now, interestingly enough, during these Ottoman-Persian wars, it was kind of, the axis was going from east to west. And the force that had Yerevan had actually the whole South Caucasus under its control. As soon as the axis changed to north-south, when Russians conquered Yerevan, the significance of Yerevan fortress immediately vanished. And the Russians, after some 40 years after that, they just, they demolished the Yerevan fortress. On the maps of late 19th century, it just says «Упраздненная Ереванская крепость». Then, in 1918, Yerevan became the capital of the Armenian Republic. I would argue that it was accidental, because when the First Republic was created, it was actually proclaimed in Tbilisi, in Georgia. And then the Georgians, they just threw away the Armenian government after a month or so, saying that, you have your own country, why are you sitting here in our country? And there was a question, where would the Armenian government go? For me, the most organic place would be Gyumri, which was called Alexandropol by that time. But it was in Turkish hands. So Yerevan, which was the center of Erivanskaya gubernia, became the place where the government came. And Yerevan is still the capital of Armenia. 1920 came the Bolsheviks. Then we had all the turbulences of the Soviet Union here, with 1937 being a year of very, very difficult times when literally the whole Armenian elite was destroyed. And after that, a new elite was sort of created. There was World War II, when a good chunk of the Lend-Lease help, do you know about Lend-Lease? Yes, you do, great, was channeled through Yerevan. Mostly, of course, it was through the Caspian Sea, but there was one of the branches coming through Yerevan. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, trucks would go on the present Mashtots Avenue. Actually, that avenue was built specifically for the Lend-Lease to be delivered in the quickest possible way. And then, when the war ended, the Soviet Armenian government came up with a new idea that, Armenia, the Soviet Armenia, is the place for all Armenians. So, guys, you should forget about Western Armenia, you should forget about Turkey and genocide, and come and live here. This is your motherland, and Yerevan is the capital of all Armenians all over the world. To make Yerevan and Armenia more attractive, even a jazz band was created here. It was a state jazz band, which was singing songs about how good life is in Armenia. What a fantastic place is in Yerevan, with the bluest sea in the world, the greenest greenery in the world, the tastiest water. So please come and join us here, guys. And there was a huge wave of immigration to Armenia. Actually, to make this wave possible, and the Armenian historians, they never talk about it, several tens of thousands of Azerbaijanis were moved from Armenia to Azerbaijan to make room for the Armenians arriving. Several tens of thousands of Armenians were moved from Azerbaijan to Central Asia. So about 300,000 Armenians came here in the years of 1946 to 49. Some of them even didn't arrive in Armenia. They were directed straight to Siberia by the Soviet powers. But here is a very important but. The 300,000 Armenians who came, and then there was a second wave in late 50s. They brought with them things which were very unusual for the Soviet Union. We usually speak, on the everyday life level that the culture of drinking coffee in Armenia comes with these repatriant people. I always used to say that somewhere in Europe you would be asked, would you like some coffee or tea? In Central Asia, you would ask, would you like green tea or black tea? In Armenia, you will be asked, how much sugar would you like in your coffee? So coffee is a given. But these repatriants, they brought with themselves the sense of freedom. The freedom that they had in the West. They brought with them, this instinctive wish to be free. They brought with themselves a lot of national memory from the genocide. Until 1965, you couldn't mention the genocide here in Yerevan because we were a part of the Soviet Union. Now, and also there was a lot of Western education coming in, because among those who arrived back in Armenia were very educated people. And you know what? They were told to be re-educated here. So, people who graduated from Sorbonne or other well-known universities had to go back to the Yerevan State University because there was the communist education there. Because there were subjects like history of Communist Party or scientific communism, which every university student in the Soviet Union had to know. I know that. I mean, I was there. But there was still this Western education. And at the same time, in the second half of 50s, three very important world-class scientists emerged in Armenia. In fact, there were four, but you will understand why am I saying three. One of them was astrophysicist and mathematician Victor Hambartsumian. He was a world-class scientist. The second was a prodigy mathematician, Sergei Mergelyan. He became a member of the Soviet Academy of Sciences when he was only 28. It's an immense achievement. And the third one were two Alikhanyan brothers. Here is the 4 and 3. Artem and Isaac. These two guys were the real fathers of the Soviet nuclear bomb. Officially, Armenians couldn't be fathers of the Soviet nuclear bomb. There should be some Russian under it. But you can say that Alikhanyan brothers, you can compare them to Oppenheimer in the United States. Now, in the second half of 20th century and until now, there is no way that you would have a scientist sitting in an ivory tower and, just thinking and producing. A scientist must have his or her own school. So there must be students, disciples, and you need time to raise them. Victor Hambartsumian was patient, and he did that. He opened a department in the Yerevan State University. Then the students would grow up, write their diplomas. Then they would grow up and write their PhDs. And while writing PhDs, they were sort of supervising other students who were writing their diplomas. Hambartsumian had that patience. Mergelian and Alikhanyan brothers, they didn't have that. They wanted everything now. So they went to Moscow, St. Petersburg, and Kiev to recruit talented, young mathematicians and physicists. Physicists? Yeah. But the most talented of them didn't want to go to Armenia because it was, a distant province, a small republic. They didn't know where they were going. However, there were dissidents, those who were very talented, but because they thought differently to the Communist Party, they couldn't advance in the capitals. So, plus to the Armenian repatriants came very talented, energetic, young dissidents from Moscow, St. Petersburg, and Kiev. And this was another factor in the Armenian freedom of the 20th century. I'll spend some 5 minutes also telling another part of story, which for me is very important for the Yerevan DNA. And this is going to be a biblical story. So you all know the story of Noah and the ark. And you know that at the end, ark settled on the mount of Ararat, which is seen from here. Now, when the waters disappeared eventually, Noah started his descent from Ararat. And he started in the right direction, to the north, to the Ararat Valley. If he was going in the other way, the whole thing would be different. But he came to the Ararat Valley, he saw a very beautiful place, and in very pure Armenian, he said, Yerevats. Yerevats, which means it can be seen. And this is the place of Yerevan. The first thing he did, he created an altar and did a sacrifice. The Echmiadzin Cathedral, of course, it's a legend, stands at the place of that altar. Now, and then he planted a vineyard. Now, I'm telling this story after a French traveler of 18th century, Jean-Baptiste Chardin. He wrote about it. Of course, his every third sentence was, I don't believe it, but the Armenians say so. But he actually wrote down this legend. And then he built this winery, which is, grape orchard, on the territory of modern Yerevan. There is a well-known place, every people in Yerevan knows that, it's called Dalma Mall. So very close to this mall is the place known as Dalma Gardens. That's reportedly, or according to this legend, the place where Noah built his orchard. Now look, every garden, every orchard that we built is a replica of the paradise. Every orchard that we built, we want to create our own little paradise. Now, Noah wanted to create his own little paradise on the territory of Yerevan. And actually, there is a map, a Dutch map of 18th century, which places paradise right here. And he couldn't stand up to the challenge. Not he, but the mankind couldn't stand up to the challenge of paradise for the second time. The first time was Adam and Eve, the second was Noah, and it was here. Now, we're rolling up the years and centuries and, histories and legends. In 1924, architect Alexander Tamanyan created the new master plan of Yerevan, which was Yerevan as the garden city. Before him, Yerevan was known as the city of gardens. Every single traveler who came here was mentioning that Yerevan is a city of gardens. And then Tamanyan, made this step and created a garden city of Yerevan. Now the thing is, will we be able to stand against that challenge of having the garden city and having this replica of Little Paradise right here? This is still a very big question, standing, looming in front of every person living in Yerevan and living in Armenia. Thank you. Thank you.